The galaxy was vast, but fear traveled faster than light. For centuries, the alliance of worlds had been held together not by armies, but by a fragile web of trust and ancient technology. Distress beacons, relics from an age when civilizations had just begun reaching for the stars. Whenever a world was under attack, its leaders could ignite the beacon and somewhere someone would hear. The promise of aid was what held the alliance together. When Valoria Prime was besieged, its skies filled with the jagged silhouettes of raider warships, the beacon was lit. The Valorians expected help from their neighbors, fleets from nearby star systems, or perhaps mercenary defenders who still honored old contracts. What they did not expect, what no one could have expected, was who answered. The beacon's call crossed forgotten paths, bouncing through star-worn conduits until it reached the Sol system. Humanity. The humans had been silent for generations. Records of their existence were spoken of in hushed tones, half myth, half warning. Some claimed they had destroyed themselves in wars too great to survive. Others whispered that they had vanished deliberately, retreating into the dark to build something the galaxy was not meant to see. Few believed they still existed at all. But the beacon lit a fire in Terran space. And humans were not the kind to ignore a fire. When Valoria's leaders gathered in their great chamber, watching the raiders' warships encircle their twin suns, despair weighed heavy. The raiders had no mercy, only hunger. Whole colonies were being stripped bare, families dragged away, resources looted. The Valorians' defenses had already fallen, their fleets scattered. Then the skies changed. First came the shadow, an eclipse across the upper atmosphere as vast ships slipped out of warp. Their hulls gleamed like obsidian mountains, bristling with weaponry that seemed older than Valoria itself. The raiders stopped firing, their ships pulling back in confusion. These were no alliance fleets, no mercenary patrols. These ships bore markings none in Valoria recognized, save for one elder who whispered the word as though it were poison. Terrans? The raiders tried to run. But the Terran fleet moved with surgical precision. Railguns fired once, and entire cruiser formations split apart like paper. Lances of plasma swept across the stars, erasing ships as though they had never been. The Valorians, huddled beneath their world's domes, felt the ground tremble as shockwaves rippled through the atmosphere from the orbital strikes above. The battle lasted less than an hour. The raiders, who had terrorized dozens of systems, were gone, obliterated so completely that only drifting ash remained. The Valorian leaders should have cheered. Aid had come. They had been saved. But as their skies filled with Terran warships, more massive than cities, an unease began to spread. The fleet did not leave. Instead they descended. A single dreadnought, its surface scarred with the patterns of countless campaigns, lowered into orbit. From its belly, smaller craft emerged, gliding like predators. They made no demands, issued no greetings. They simply landed in formation outside Valoria's capital. When their doors opened, armored figures stepped out. Human soldiers. The Valorians had expected diplomats, perhaps generals seeking payment. What they saw were warriors, tall, unflinching, their armor forged from alloys unknown to Valorian science. They carried weapons that hummed with restrained power, weapons meant not just to kill, but to end wars in an instant. At their head was a commander, his face lined, his eyes cold as the void. He surveyed the city, the people, the planet as though cataloging it for ownership. When he finally spoke, his voice carried across the plaza, amplified by translators. Signal received. Hostiles neutralized. Territory secured. Secured. Not liberated. Not saved. Secured. The Valorian chancellor, trembling yet proud, stepped forward. We thank you. You have saved us. You have our gratitude. The commander's gaze lingered on him, unblinking. Your beacon was activated. You called for aid. The Terran fleet has responded. Valoria is now under Terran protection. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Protection? The Valorians had asked for help, not guardianship. The Chancellor tried to protest. We did not mean, surely you cannot. The commander raised a gauntlet hand and silence fell. The beacon is an oath. It was not built for you. It was built by those who came before. By those who understood what it meant to call humanity. His eyes darkened. Aid is never free. Above, the Terran fleet hung like storm clouds, blotting out the sun. Their engines glowed faintly, each ship bristling with weapons capable of cracking moons. The galaxy had not seen such power in centuries. And now, all who watched understood the truth. Humanity had returned. The Valorians were safe from raiders, yes. But they had awakened something far older, far more dangerous. The call for help had not summoned allies. It had summoned conquerors cloaked as saviors. News spread swiftly through the stars. Neighboring systems, watching from the safety of distance, whispered in fear. If the Terrans had answered once, they would answer again. Any beacon, anywhere, might bring not salvation but subjugation. On Valoria, the people looked to the skies with a mix of awe and dread. Their enemies were gone, their world saved. But now, they belonged to something greater, something they could not hope to control. The Chancellor stood in his chamber that night, staring at the twin suns through his window. He had asked for aid. And aid had come, not as a hand but as an iron fist. Far above, the Terran commander sent a single message to the fleet, his voice calm, resolute. Valoria secured. The galaxy will know. Humanity answers. And in the silent dark beyond, fleets stirred, shipyards awoke, and a new chapter began. The galaxy would never be the same again. The galaxy had forgotten Earth. Millennia ago, before the rise of the great empires, before the Council of Worlds established its laws, humanity had walked among the stars. They had forged alliances, fought wars, and written their name across hundreds of worlds. But their time in the open was brief. The Terrans had vanished into obscurity, leaving only whispers behind. And yet, some relics of that forgotten age remained. One of them was the Distress Beacon Network, a system of ancient devices encoded with promises made by civilizations long gone. These beacons carried not only pleas for help but obligations sealed in quantum code. To activate one was to invoke treaties older than any empire now standing. The Orlan Reach, a cluster of peaceful agrarian colonies, knew nothing of this history. When the iron-fisted Kryath Dominion swept into their territory with fleets of jagged warships, the Orlanians turned in desperation to their beacon. They believed it a simple tool, a signal to nearby allies. They did not know what power slept behind its message. The beacon lit, flaring across subspace with ancient authority. By oath, by blood, by honor, aid is required. The Kryath Dominion laughed when they intercepted the signal. Who could come to the Orlanians' aid? The Council would never risk war with the Dominion. The colonies were defenseless, their fields ripe for conquest. Victory was assured. Or so the Kryath believed. Deep in the dark reaches of space, far beyond mapped territory, the signal was received. In the Sol system, buried beneath layers of silence and secrecy, ancient servers stirred. Protocols older than living memory unlocked. Humanity's long exile ended with one sentence. Distress beacon authenticated. Deploy war fleet. When the Kryath fleet descended on Orlan Prime, the skies glowed red with fire. The Dominion's warlords demanded surrender. Orlan cities trembled as plasma bombardments cracked their shields. Farmers armed with little more than repurposed mining lasers stood at the walls, waiting to be slaughtered. Then the stars changed. A ripple in space tore open above the planet, like reality itself bending. From the void emerged ships, vast, angular, black against the sun. They came not one by one but in legions, dozens of capital ships escorted by swarms of smaller craft. Their arrival was silent but overwhelming. The Kryath Dominion froze. These were not alliance ships. They bore no banners, no colors, no familiar signatures. The newcomers broadcast only a single word, repeated on every channel. Terran. The Dominion's warlord sneered. Ghosts, he spat. Legends to frighten children. He ordered his fleet forward. The first volley of Terran fire proved him wrong. Kinetic rounds the size of mountains tore through Dominion cruisers. Plasma lances burned holes through dreadnought hulls as though they were paper. Ships that had ruled entire sectors for decades exploded in seconds. The Dominion's proud fleet had no time to retreat, no time to regroup. Orlan's citizens watched as their would-be conquerors were erased from existence. The battle was not war. It was annihilation. When the last Dominion wreck drifted into silence, the Terran fleet remained. The Orlanians expected communication, perhaps negotiation. Instead, silence reigned. Terran warships descended into orbit, their black hulls blotting out the sun. Dropships landed near the Orlan capital, releasing soldiers clad in armor so advanced it seemed alive. At their head marched a commander whose very presence carried the weight of history. His armor bore the scars of campaigns older than the Orlan civilization itself. His voice, amplified by translators, was iron. Distress beacon received. Pact invoked. The Terran fleet answers. The Orlan governor stepped forward, trembling but grateful. We thank you. You have saved us. The commander regarded him coldly. The beacon is not gratitude. It is obligation. The Orlan Reach is now under Terran protection, until the pact expires. The governor faltered. The pact? We sign no pact. The commander's eyes narrowed. You inherited it. When your ancestors took these worlds, you inherited their debts as well as their soil. The pact is eternal. You called. We answered. In the Council of Worlds, panic spread. Reports flooded in. The Terrans had returned. Entire fleets had been mobilized overnight. Their technology surpassed anything the galaxy had seen in centuries. Worse, they were bound not by diplomacy but by ancient contracts no one alive remembered. Some whispered that this was the end of the Council. If the Terrans honored every beacon still hidden in forgotten corners of the stars, entire sectors could fall under their protection. No empire could stop them. The Kryth Dominion raged. The loss of their fleet was a humiliation they could not endure. They swore vengeance, promising to rally allies to crush the Terrans. But fear not at them. The Dominion had ruled by terror. Now, for the first time, they had found something more terrifying than themselves. On Orlan Prime, the people tried to celebrate their survival, but unease lingered. Terran warships still filled the skies. Soldiers patrolled the streets, polite but unyielding, their discipline absolute. The Orlanians had been saved, but also claimed. At night, the governor stared from his palace at the silhouette of the Terran flagship, its colossal form blotting out the stars. He had asked for aid, unknowingly invoking an oath sealed before his people's ancestors had even learned to write. Aid had come. But it had come wrapped in chains of iron. The Terran commander sent his report to Earth. His words were simple, direct. Orlan reach secured. Pact fulfilled. Awaiting further signals. In the silence of deep space, other beacons began to flicker. Some ancient, some accidental, some desperate. Each one carried the same binding code. And humanity, long forgotten, would answer them all. The galaxy had forgotten Earth. But Earth had not forgotten the galaxy. And now the galaxy would remember. The planet Tyrathel had never known war. Its people, tall and luminous-skinned, were artists, scholars and gardeners of great crystal cities that gleamed beneath 3 suns. Violence was something they read about in the archives, a relic of a barbaric past they believed only other species still indulged in. But when the swarm came, Tyrathel's illusions of peace shattered. The invaders were not a fleet of ships, not soldiers with banners, but a tide of biomechanical horrors, creatures born of steel and flesh, half machine, half organism. They devoured whole worlds, stripping oceans and skies until nothing remained. The Tyratheli had no armies, no fleets. Their shields crumbled within days, their cities fell silent one by one. Desperate, their leaders gathered in the Hall of Harmony. There, beneath murals of stars and flowers, they activated their ancient distress beacon. Encoded in the standard tongue, it was a plea for mercy. To any who hear, help us. We are dying. We beg aid. But the dialect they used was older than they knew, corrupted by centuries of drift. Far across the stars, in the hidden bastions of Terran space, the signal arrived. Humanity's translation AIs listened carefully. Their conclusion was not, help us. It was, war declared. Territory contested. Humanity did not hesitate. The Terran war fleet had been silent for decades, guarding only their own systems. But they had not grown complacent. Their shipyards churned endlessly, their fleets trained as though war could break at any moment. When the Tyratheli beacon reached them, the Terran High Command interpreted it as a challenge. Someone had dared declare war on them. And so, humanity moved. From Sol's black hole forges, dreadnoughts emerged, each one the size of a continent. Carriers released swarms of interceptors, their hulls sharp as knives. Juggernauts, ancient leviathans armed with weapons powerful enough to crack moons, awoke from their docks. In less than a week, a fleet large enough to conquer a sector was en route. The galaxy did not notice until it was too late. On Tyrathel, despair reigned. The swarm had breached the capital's outer walls. Families fled into the mountains. Priests sang farewell hymns beneath collapsing spires. The Chancellor stood at the balcony of the Hall of Harmony, watching his people burn. Then the skies tore open. It began as a hum, a vibration that rattled every window. Clouds split apart and from the void above, ships descended. Not the swarm. Something else. Something worse. They blotted out the suns. Hundreds of them. Their engines burned with blue fire, their hulls black as midnight. Each bore the same mark, a pale sigil of Earth, a world none on Tyrathel had ever heard of. The swarm shrieked and turned upward, sensing a predator greater than themselves. They launched by the thousands, organic ships unfurling like wings. The Terrans did not speak. They did not ask questions. They opened fire. Railguns screamed. Lances of pure plasma carved the swarm into ribbons. Interceptors weaved through the alien tide, cutting with surgical precision. The ground shook as kinetic strikes obliterated whole hives. The swarm, which had consumed dozens of worlds, was erased in hours. The Terathali, huddled in ruins, watched in awe and terror. Their prayers had been answered, yet what descended upon them felt less like salvation and more like judgment. When the last of the swarm burned in orbit, the Terrans came to the surface. Dropships landed in perfect formation outside the capital. Soldiers in armor like living iron marched forth, their visors glowing faintly. At their head walked a commander, scarred, his voice cold as stone. He stood before the Terathali Chancellor, who knelt trembling in gratitude. "You saved us," the Chancellor whispered. "We owe you everything." The commander tilted his head. "You misunderstand. Your message reached Terran Command. It stated, War Declaration." The Chancellor froze. "War Declaration?" "Yes," the commander said. His gaze swept across the ruined city, the corpses of swarm beasts smoldering in the streets. "You declared war against Earth. We responded. The enemy is destroyed. Territory is now under Terran protection." The words cut deeper than any blade. The Terathali tried to explain. The beacon was a plea for help, a mistranslation, a mistake. But the Terrans did not care. To them the code was clear. The Chancellor's protests were met with silence. The commander gave his final words: "Your world has been contested. It is Terran now." The Terathali found themselves both saved and conquered in the same breath. Terran banners rose above their surviving cities. Soldiers patrolled streets that had never known weapons. Engineers began constructing new facilities, shipyards, barracks, foundries, as though Tyrathal were merely another piece in humanity's endless war machine. The people whispered in confusion and fear. Were these saviors or overlords? Both perhaps. And beyond Tyrathal, the news spread like wildfire. Other civilizations watched in horror. The swarm had been defeated, yes, but at what cost? A peaceful world was now shackled beneath Earth's boot because of a mistranslated signal. If the Terrans would seize Tyrathal so casually, what would stop them from doing the same to others? In the Dominion halls, in the council chambers, in the pirate dens, the same whispers spread. Do not call the Terrans. Do not ever call them. But for many worlds the beacons were old, their codes forgotten. At any time, another could flare, another plea for mercy misread as a declaration of war. And the Terrans would answer. On Tyrathal, the Chancellor stood alone in his chamber, staring at the new Terran citadel rising in the distance. His people were alive. His world was safe. Yet freedom was gone, replaced by the shadow of Earth. He whispered to himself, "We asked for aid, and we summoned conquerors." High above, aboard the flagship Iron Vow, the Terran commander made his report. His voice carried no triumph, no joy, only the cold efficiency of a machine of war. Enemy neutralized. Hostile claimant world secured. Awaiting further declarations. And somewhere in the silent dark, other beacons flickered. The galaxy had forgotten Earth. Now Earth was reminding them.